Adesso c'è un momento davvero topico perché abbiamo l'intervista con Suzanne Ciani, che vedo già connessa, e abbiamo anche due ospiti che introduco subito. Uno è Giorgio Calzi. Ciao Giorgio.
Ciao a tutti.
Abbiamo anche di nuovo io, che abbiamo visto oggi a pranzo.
Ciao.
E abbiamo Suzanne. Ciao Suzanne.
Ciao. Siamo dal vivo adesso, sì?
Sì.
Okay. Mi senti?
Siamo online.
Ok, benissimo.
Ok. Allora Giorgio, ci senti?
Sì, ti sento. Ciao a
Perfetto.
tutti. Ciao Johann, ciao Suzanne.
Buonasera. Ciao Johann. Okay.
Ciao. Can we speak Italian or you prefer in English?
Yeah. Well, you know, my English is better. I think we decided that more people, più gente può capire inglese che italiano, no?
Okay.
Non sono perfetta, ma...
No, okay. I try in English.
Come vuoi.
Okay. I try in English. My English is very bad, but excuse me for my English. So thank you very much for coming to SOUNDMIT 2020 today. I'm Giorgio Calzi from the Show Music Festival, which is in Chamois, near Turin, in the Matterhorn Valley.
Ah, che bella. Vorrei venire, non stare qua in casa e parlare.
Infatti, noi ti avevamo. We hope to have you a performance of you in the near future. In fact, I have just a few words to say that all our musical community of musician, electronic musician, or people who love electronic music, we looking forward to watching and listening to your concert last July in Chamois.
Yes.
But, this plan was cancelled because of the pandemic. So. Oh. So we hope to arrange this concert in the near future when we will have the possibility to invite you again. Oh, what a fantastic...
I will surely come. I can't wait. I'm ready. Sono pronta. Vorrei venire subito. Che sogno. Avevo piani. I had great plans, you know, to visit every place and to spend some summer days in the mountains. So I'm sorry.
We will surely do in the next future. But for now, we just want to thank you for your great work with the piano, with composing your sound design for the advertising world, for the video games, and for your work with the synthesizer, with the Buchla system, and also for your great artistic career. I saw you released a recent single for Deutsche Grammophon.
A single for what?
For Deutsche Grammophon.
Oh yes. Yes, so, that was fun. Yeah. But, I love that. That was done on the Moog 1. Normally, you know, I've been playing the Buchla, but I composed that piece on the Moog.
Oh yeah. I read you intended to work with a Moog engineering some years ago.
Yes, I've been working with Moog for several years, and we've become very close. So I did a project for the subharmonicon. It was called Music as Living Matter, and that was my most recent. But my performance now is based around the Buchla.
Fantastic. So now I would like to leave you with Johann Merrich, who is a female artist who will ask you about some questions, all details about the Buchla systems. And so thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Francesco too, because
Grazie a voi.
he
Thank you
arranged
too.
a very good video version of SOUNDMIT. I think is a very good situation to share this festival to the world. So Suzanne, I hope to see you very soon, maybe in Chamois performing for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Grazie, Giorgio. Ci vediamo, speriamo.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Ciao Giorgio.
Ciao. Ciao Francesco, ciao Johann.
Ciao.
Ciao, Johann. Ciao.
It's
Vi lascio l'intervista.
I'm very excited to speak with you, Suzanne, and very honored to have this opportunity to ask you a few questions. I remember the first time I came across your name was like in 2010, thanks to a book that I was reading. It was called Analog Days, The Invention and Impact of the Moog Synthesizer by Trevor Finch and Frank Trocco. And that book opened a whole universe of composers, both women and men, involved in electronic music history. So I guess, and I think that you would be probably tired of answering the same questions every time. But I want to know if don't you think that it's strange that although women were very present in the early days of electronic music history, nowadays books are not really treating this argument, and women are barely represented in books about these issues. So I would like to know what's your point of view, as you are one of the most important and famous electronic music pioneers, no matter your gender. I mean, it's just you are this.
You know, I agree with you that we have not seen our history in the way it really is. There's a new film called Sisters with Transistors. Have you seen that?
Not ready. Not yet.
Well, Lisa Rovner in England came to me several years ago with she wanted to, it said failed to connect to chat. Okay. She wanted to make a film that would show the history of women in electronic music. And I think she did a beautiful job. And my sadness is always that I didn't know the history. So when I was growing up and making electronic music, I did not know about the women in electronic music historically. And this is very sad because I think we all want to feel, like we belong and that there are people we share, our work with. And so I just discovered Delia Derbyshire, Daphne Oram, just recently. Yeah. So my role model when I was in technology and young was a photographer. I didn't know any women musicians in technology. I only knew Ilse Bing, who was a German photographer, and photography is a technological art form. So I shared with her that, that connection of technology.
Yeah, and I hope that we will improve altogether the situation, because people like you, or also like Eliana Radig, or other great famous composer, can be a great source of inspiration also for young composer, both women and men, of course. But we must write again the story, the history.
They call it her story.
Her story, I like it.
They did his story has been told, but now we need to tell her story.
Yeah, completely agree with you. So about your story.
Yes.
So how did it all start for you? How did you get into making electronic music?
I was raised in classical music. So when I was young, I played the piano. I loved music. I majored in music in college. Then I went to graduate school and got a degree in music composition. And we studied counterpoint and harmony and the great male history of music. And at that very moment, I met Don Buchla, who was the inventor of maybe the first, analog modular musical instruments. He was in Berkeley, where I was going to school. And I decided to go to work for him when I finished school. But the attraction of this instrument to me was intuitive. I didn't really understand. I just felt this strong, strong attachment. And I think that for women, what the promise was that you could be independent. You could control your music, make your music independently. You didn't need to integrate into the infrastructure of music. I mean, no women were hired to conduct. No women were hired to compose. There were no women in the symphonies. Women were singers and maybe soloists, but not composers.
Mm-hmm.
And with this machine, you could do it all yourself. You didn't need the support of the institutions that didn't care about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was like a great way also to be independent as a woman, as a working woman. I think, as you demonstrated in your work for sound and commercials. So thinking about the Buchla factory, I heard some stories that it was a kind of a weird place, really weird, but like it was a very different factory. It was not the typical place where one had to work. So how was the ambience in the Buchla factory, and what was your role there?
Well, you have to imagine that this was the late 60s in Berkeley, California, which was the center of our political revolution. And the hippies, hippies were just taking over the world. So everybody had long hair, nobody wore shoes. It was a very alternative kind of social experiment. So Buchla fit right into that. The company, the people that worked there were not, trained. Nobody was trained as an engineer. So we had poets and Indian spiritual leaders and Indian dancers and philosophers and, just unusual people. And we sat at a table, long table. We were not allowed to talk while we worked. Buchla was very strict. And we had the radio on in the background, and I had schematics and a circuit board. And my job was to take the parts, the resistors, transistors, etc., and put them into the circuit board and solder them. And day one, so my first day of work, at the end of the day, when they tested the circuit boards, they found one bad soldering joint. And so I was fired.
Wow.
I was fired the first day. I said, why? Why are you firing me? And they said, well, it must be the new girl. We found a bad soldering joint. You're out. And I said, you can't fire me. And I came back the next day and I stayed. So, but he tried to fire me.
So it was really a dance ambient, powerful.
Right. I knew what I want.
But I heard also that after a while, when you're working at the Buchla factory, you gained a prize, and you had the opportunity to use the private studio of Donald Buchla. Is it true? It was
What
like
was,
that.
what
Donald
was that? What about the prize? What did you say?
That Don Buchla had this private studio, and no
Yes.
one could use it, but you gained the opportunity to use
Yes.
it and to go there.
Yes, I used the studio a lot. It was amazing. It was a huge room, like a warehouse. You know, it was in an industrial zone, you know, down by the railroad and down by the bay. So it was in a remote part of Berkeley and very big. And Buchla had towers of modules in the middle of the room. And there was a swing, you know, from the ceiling. And you could get on the swing and hear the music, you know, flying through space. It was wonderful. So Buchla and I were not good friends because there were still problems with women being accepted in this area. We were not taken seriously. And so it was kind of not, you know, a very encouraging environment. But yes, I did get access to the instrument and I did work there.
And you, in that way, you got your first Buchla system. You gained, you were able to pay for your first Buchla system.
Well, I didn't pay for it with the $3 per hour that I was making there. This is when I started to do commercials. I did my first commercials for Macy's department store. So there was a Christmas campaign, and I saw that I could make money doing that. And so I started to do commercial work on the side, you know, and slowly, you know, with the system, you build it up piece by piece, module by module. So you can maybe start with a few modules, and then as you make money, you add more. So by the time, you know, in 3 years, I had a good system.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your first album has been recorded in a radio, isn't it? In a Berkeley radio station, the KPFA radio station. Is it correct?
Yes, KPFA is a public radio station. Yeah.
And why did you choose to go there to record it? Why this place was so special, and what kind of technologies and tools did you use to record this first album?
It's interesting because I never considered Voices of Packaged Souls to be my first album until it was released by Finders Keepers.
Mm-hmm.
It was a limited edition with a unique piece of art on the cover by sculptor Harold Paris. It was done for Harold's opening in Brussels, Belgium. At that time, I was working at Stanford University, taking a class there in computer music. And I also had a small studio in my garage. And I took some of the samples of computer music and some of the samples from my garage and some recordings. And KPFA gave me the studio from midnight until 5 a.m. So I had it all to myself, you know, in the middle of the night. And I took all these materials, and it was really a musique concrète. So I took the pieces and I spliced them and I arranged them. And that's how I made that album. So it has samples of pure computer music, which was brand new then. And Buchla, and recordings. There was one piece called "The Sound of an Old Man Loving." Do you understand that? An old man loving, making love. And my sister had just had a baby, and she sent me a recording of the baby's voice. And I took that voice and I slowed it down on the tape recorder. And that became the old man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and very touching.
Yeah. No, it was so many discoveries in sound. You know, when you start to change the sounds that we hear. There was another discovery I made having to do with the speed of the sound. So when the harmonizer came in, the eventide harmonizer, which meant that you could lower and raise the pitch of whatever you chose, I took my voice and I lowered it 0.8. So it was just down by 20% or whatever. And I sounded just like a gay man, because in my voice, there's a lot of expression, right? I don't talk like this. I'm not just like, I'm a female. And so I have a lot of expression in my voice. And when that was slowed down, it was so convincing that I was suddenly a different gender, and I loved it. I became this person called Steve, but I never released anything. I made records, but I never released them. But that was another, discovery. But
I mean, sometimes throughout discoveries you can find also like pearls and gems and treasure. So please release also.
Someday. It's always been a sensitive subject, but I thought this was a true discovery that, when men are, want to be female, their voices take on a lot of inflection. And in fact, that's what women do. And,
It demonstrates also your side, as we are part of both. This kind of experiment is able also to explain how is the male Suzanne.
Yes, exactly.
So concerning love matters, it's often said that you have been in a deep love with your Buchla system. Many articles of newspapers says things like Suzanne Ciani in love with her machines, and kind of things like that. So I would like to know what's prompted you to favor that instruments and not to use other systems. So why, for example, in those early days, you did not choose to use Moog systems, for example, and you stick with the Buchla?
Well, I think one thing is that the design of the Buchla was very communicative from the beginning. So the Buchla seemed to be alive. It had a lot of lights always, so the lights are talking back to you. It seemed to have a brain. It was almost human. When I played the Moog, there was no communication. The Moog could make sounds, but it wasn't talking to me. And Buchla he was designing a performance instrument. So an instrument that you could play live, like any instrument. In order to perform this type of instrument, you need to know what's going on inside. So his instrument, you can't quite see this, but it has hundreds of lights, LEDs that tell you what's going on. It has color-coded cables. It's very friendly. And I would keep it on all the time. Even today, I never shut it off because it's alive. I think of it as being alive. And so, yes, I had a very strong relationship. And I thought at one point that there might be something wrong with me, because I was in love with the machine. And I remember I went to New York City and I took a seminar. So my goal was to perform live in New York City. And I actually found an agent, Bill Parada. I remember his name now. And he said, well, if we're going to work together, I want you to take this course. It takes 1 weekend and you'll go in and they will, you will be released from whatever. We will have better communication. So I took the course, and my secret was that I was in love with the machine. And at the end of the course, they said, humans are just machines.
Mm.
We have operating systems. And if we can understand those operating systems, we'll be better off. And so I thought to myself, oh, so people are machines and I'm in love with the machine, so I guess I'm okay.
Wrong.
But then, of course, the problem was, why did I leave the machine? Well, the machine left me. I mean, you can imagine being so connected to something, and then it broke. And it couldn't be fixed. I mean, I would send it to Buchla. He would fix it. He would ship it back, and it would arrive broken. Mm. It was very, very traumatic for me, because this machine wasn't really replaceable. I didn't know anybody else who had one. And then the other thing that happened was that half of it was stolen. So I would go to do session work in New York, and I had a cartage company, a truck that would move my instruments from one studio to another. And one day, only half of the Buchla arrived. And I thought, I can't go on. So I put the other half of the Buchla in a corner in my studio and pretty much forgot about it. Not completely, but I did then, by that time, a lot of new instruments were being designed. Dave Smith had the Prophet 5, and he had an early sequencer, beautiful pieces of equipment. Then we had Yamaha, and I designed sounds for the DX7 and Roland, and I started working with all the companies. And it wasn't until, 5 years ago that I came back to my original dream, which was to perform live quadraphonic on the Buchla. So that's what I'm doing now.
Because at some point of your career, you took a complete break from electronic music, and you focused more into classical composition. You came back to your roots, and so is this like a little part of your decision was due to this kind of accident that could happen with technologies? Is this the reason that pushed you to move back to classical music?
My so-called first album for me, my first studio album was 7 Waves, and that was realized completely electronically. Then in my second album, The Velocity of Love, on the very last piece, I added a piano for the first time. That was the instrument that I played as a child. And that song became a hit. Everybody loved it. And what I noticed, without thinking really, was that all my albums after that became gradually more acoustic.
Mhm.
So, I'd add a cello, I'd add a flute, an oboe, an English horn. And finally, I recorded a purely orchestral album in Russia, and it was called Dream Suite. And I performed this live in Milano. I remember, this is in like 1994, 95. So Italy really was the only place that I ever got to perform my orchestral album. So it was piano and orchestra. And then I did pure piano. I did 3 albums of piano, pianissimo, pianissimo 2,
Mhm.
pianissimo 3. I have 5 books of piano music published by Hal Leonard. So I was, the piano was the first instrument that I loved, and the Buchla was the second. And the odd thing is that when I started playing the Buchla, I did not touch the piano. Because for Buchla, the piano keyboard was dangerous.
Mhm.
Because when people saw the piano keyboard on the analog instrument, they thought it was a keyboard instrument,
Mhm.
and it's not.
Yeah.
My keyboard looks like this. It's not a traditional keyboard. And so because I was trying to communicate this new instrument, I didn't want any confusion. You see, I had to educate my audience
Mm.
because nobody understood it.
Yeah.
So, and it was a new way of playing. So it's not keyboard, it's control voltages.
Of course.
Of course.
You look like an alien just arrived from another planet. So I see that there are some questions from the audience. So maybe
Okay.
if you wanted to reply. Like
Okay.
Stefano D'Angelo is asking, hello, Suzanne, where do you think Buchla legacy can be found today? What about...
Where do I think the Buchla legacy can be found today?
Yeah.
Well, the Buchla company is still alive. It was, there was a bad period when somebody bought the company, somebody from Australia. But now it's back in the United States, and it's run by Eric Fox, and they are continuing to make the modules. So you can still, they're still alive. You can still buy. My instrument is the 200E. The 200, we're hoping that they will reissue that. That was the one I played in the, Buchla concerts, 1975. So this is a little bit different. It's in the same family. But Buchla designed many instruments. So he had the marimba lumina, which was a mallet instrument. And he had the lightning and the thunder, which were played with, a new interface. So, but what I'm in love with is this one. And so we're making, I'm going to work with the Buchla company to design a module that I want.
And there was another person who wanted to know, what do you think about the Eurorack system and about the new music scenes that was born around this kind of system?
I'm very excited about, this is for me a dream come true, that now there's a renaissance of interest in analog, modular. The kids are performing, they're playing live, There's an Italian woman, Caterina Barbieri, who's playing live. And I think it's starting to go the right way. When I first looked at Eurorack, I was happy that it was inexpensive so that more people could buy it. But the instruments were not communicative. So there were no lights. There was no, none of the things that Buchla had. This is starting to change. I'm not in love with the format. It's very tiny, to get your hands in there. There's no room. It's hard enough, with this size. So I wish that we could see another evolution of independent design, where a larger format separating audio and control voltages for clarity. It's so hard to look. When I look at this Buchla, look, I have a red input first for pulses, that's timing, a black input for control voltages. My audio inputs are a completely different kind of connector. And all of this helps. Plus I have, I have lights that show me the intensity of, okay, let's see. Let's do this. Okay, I'm starting to play now. Okay, but the lights tell me everything that's going on. So if I start this, I can see, where the stage is. I can see where the pulses are coming out. I can program it quickly. I can interact. And so my desire is that these instruments be used for live performance and that the designers design with that in mind. How can you create an instrument that talks back and that what's going on inside?
And there is another guy who wants to know, who asked, do you think the software can give you the same emotion using an external device, or you want a real LED talking to you?
I think for an instrument, I like hands-on. I like to be able to go, and I think that's what the kids want. That's why they went backwards. They said, stop. We don't want to use a mouse all the time. We don't want to sit at our computers all the time. We want to touch something, move something, patch something. We want to physically interact. And I give them credit for stopping, looking backwards. And that's why I want to show the Buchla, because this is the origin of this instrument. But it was, I call Buchla the Leonardo da Vinci of electronic music instrument design. Da Vinci thought of airplanes, helicopters. He was ahead of his time. And Buchla is that way. From the beginning, he played in quadraphonic. I have voltage controlled spatial modulation. All of these things that haven't quite come to the surface yet. Do you understand?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was dreaming with my mind, thinking about to have a Buchla here in my studio.
But I love the new designs. I do. I love Make Noise. I love the Depfer. I think he's done an amazing. He opened up this whole market, and I'm very excited about all the young designers. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think that we have many questions to ask you, but our time, unfortunately.
Ok. Molto grazie, sono molto contenta.
Grazie a te, Suzanne. Nel frattempo siamo rientrati in studio, ci sono un sacco di commenti e ci dispiace anche lasciarci, ma dobbiamo stare nella tempistica
Sì, ho capito.
Della
ma
diretta.
Loro possono chiedere sul mio sito.
Sì?
Sì, perché no? Se hanno bisogno, non lo so. No, sì, c'è la possibilità di comunicare anche il mio sito. Ok.
Perfetto.
Benissimo.
Grazie.
Grazie a voi. Buona
Thank you.
serata. Ok, ciao.
Ciao, grazie.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Ok, ciao Johann, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.